Okay, this is example 5. Again, well, just as in the last one, you can see it's already solved, set equal to 0. So, usually that's good, but unfortunately, we really can't factor this. So, it's not really that helpful to have it set equal to 0 if there's no factoring that can be done. So, instead, we're going to just try to solve for x. So the first thing I'm going to do is add 3 on both sides. Thus moving it over there. I'm going to divide both sides by 4, which gives me this. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides, which cancels my square on the cosine squared. And on the right, I have plus or minus the square root of 3 over 4. And then that can simplify down to be the square plus or minus square root of 3 over the square root of 4, which is plus or minus root 3 over 2. Okay, now cosine. The cosine of x is plus or minus the square root of 3 over 2. Now cosine where can it be positive and negative? Everywhere. Cosine is positive on the right side of the origin, cosine is negative on the left side of the origin, so we're actually talking about all 4 quadrants here. So if I drew triangles in all 4 quadrants, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and said that the cosine is the square root of 3 over 2, either positive or negative, so this distance right here would be positive square root of 3 over 2 for these 2 triangles, and this distance right here would be negative square root of 3 over 2 for these 2 triangles. What triangles would these be? Are these angles here? Well, if this side is square root of 3 over 2, then the vertical sides must be 1/2. Or negative if it's down here. And so, what are these angles here? Well, if it's opposite from 1/2, it's 30 degrees, otherwise known as pi over 6. So this is 1 pi over 6, this one would be 5 pi over 6, this one would be 7 pi over 6, and this one would be 11 pi over 6. Okay, so again, as long as our answers don't get larger than 2 pi, we can accept them. So really, these are the only 4 answers that are allowable. So I'm just going to go ahead and write those down. And that's it. We cannot give them infinitely many answers. We can only give them answers that fit in the first 4 quadrants, and that's what we already have. So that's it. We're done. And then the last example, example 6, is this one. There's one huge danger in these questions, and that is trying to divide by an expression. If you divide by an expression, meaning that it's got an x or an unknown value in it, what you basically do is you chop off some of the possible answers that you could have gotten. So you kind of shorthand your answers. So please be very, very careful not to divide by anything that's not just a regular number, like 2 or the square root of 5 or something like that. Okay, if it's got an x in it, please do not divide. So if we can't divide, what are we going to do here? Well, what I would do is I would move everything over to the left-hand side and set it equal to 0 by subtracting sign on both sides. So I have this expression and then set equal to 0. Then I would say, yes, I do have a sign in common. I have a sign here and a sign here. I'm going to factor that out. So if I factor out the sign of the first term, I have tangent. If I factor out the sign here, I just get 1. And again, I can incorporate my 0 product rule, which basically says something times something equals 0. Well, find all possible answers by saying, all right, the first thing could be 0, or the second thing could be 0. Here, obviously, I just add 1 on both sides to get my final value. So where is sine equal to 0? Well, on a unit circle, sine is your y value, and at this position here, we have x value of 1, y value 0. And this position here, we have x value negative 1, y value 0. So these are the 2 positions where the sine, or the y, is 0. This position would be radians of 0, and this position would be radians of pi. So those are my first 2 answers, 0 and pi, and as long as they're within the appropriate range, we're good. Yes, we are. Okay, can we add 2 pi to each one of these? No, because that would get us an angle larger than 2 pi itself. So those are the only 2 answers. Tangent equals 1 is a little bit trickier. Again, you can go back to the table on page 541 for tangent values. That's actually really helpful. And that'll tell you that you have a positive tangent value in quadrant 1 of pi over 4. Now it turns out tangent is positive in both first quadrant and third quadrant, because here y and x are both positive, so it gives you a positive answer. And down here in the third quadrant, y and x are both negative, so when you make a fraction of 2 negatives, you also get a positive answer. So tangent is also positive down here at a reference angle of pi over 4 away from the x-axis, which would give you a positional angle of 5 pi over 4. So it turns out those are the last 2 answers to this question. X equals pi over 4 and x equals 5 pi over 4. Both of them within the correct interval. Yes, not too big, because we haven't gone more than 1 circle around. And there you have it.